Thanks for pressing play on another edition of Another Dolphins Podcast. Joshua Houtz is out of the office today, but I have Kat, our relief pitcher, joining me today. And we had some surprising news break Thursday afternoon as Adam Schefter reported the Dolphins have had trade talks with the Pittsburgh Steelers involving Jonnu Smith. Kat, I can't think of a better lead-in than that without saying what on earth. Did you see this coming?
I was thinking a couple of days ago, I was surprised that he hadn't asked for more money this offseason. That was the surprising thing to me. And I remember thinking last week, man, we're almost in June, and I guess he just really likes playing for the Dolphins and playing in Florida. But the reality is, Jonnu Smith's going to be 30 years old. He had a career year in catches, yards, touchdowns. And $4.5 million probably just isn't going to fly for him. I mean, you look at the seventh or eighth tight end, you're talking about like the Pat Freiermuth and the David Njoku's, they're getting 12, 13 million. So no, I'm not surprised. And Jonnu Smith was a great signing last year, but I'm a bit conflicted on whether or not I would be interested in trading him. So we can certainly talk through that.
I felt a little silly because on the last show with Josh, I mentioned that I think there were 4 players not in attendance at OTAs, and outside of Ramsey, I'm like, no, I'm feeling pretty good about all of them. And then here we have this Jonnu Smith news. And at first it did catch me as a little bit of a surprise, but you're 100% right. He's scheduled to make about $4 million. And things on the surface make it seem like, why don't you give this guy the money? He just came off a contract or a career year, 88 receptions, 884 yards, and 8 touchdowns, a bunch of franchise records, massively utilized in the Mike McDaniel offense. And you say, you gave Tyreek Hill the extension, you gave Jalen Ramsey the extension. You're not going to give this guy who came in and just instantly was a massive contributor that contract extension. It kind of has you scratching your head. But after that initial reaction, you kind of start thinking about things. He's 30 years old. There's a reason why these are franchise records for the Dolphins and that a tight end hasn't been utilized in this offense before. And the Dolphins were like 22nd in points per game last year. So looking at last year's statistics, I don't think necessarily indicate that, hey, the offense is going to be even better with Jonnu Smith putting up that production again.
Yeah, well said. And it's hard to make an argument that you should trade the only Pro Bowl player from last year, Jonnu Smith. But I've got to say there are only 2 players on the Dolphins roster that I want here week 1 that will be 29 or older, and that is Zach Sealer, because I think Zach Sealer is going to age very well. I think he has a fighting chance to be like Cameron Hayward or Calais Campbell, where just because of his size and durability, I could see him playing another 5 years at a high level. And also somebody that people also want to follow. And secondly, Bradley Chubb, only because he took such a cheap contract that's almost completely based on incentive. So Jonnu Smith, look, I really feel like when the Dolphins rebuild this thing back up again, he's not going to be here anyway. So for that reason, yeah, I do think that if he wants to reunite with Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh, which has been the rumor, yeah, I think I would grant him that, and hopefully the Dolphins can get some decent compensation back.
This is really interesting because it wasn't like Jonnu Smith wants a contract extension or Jonnu Smith wants to get traded. It was the idea of Schefter mentioned that there have been trade talks. Jonnu Smith wants more money. There wasn't necessarily a conversation in terms of more years. And with the Dolphins sitting there at $13 million, Kat, is that something like... It's tough because I think Jonnu Smith has a great argument for getting that pay raise, and even for 1 year, considering the Dolphins have a little bit of room and they'll have some more room when Jalen Ramsey is off the books. But how do you manage a situation like that? Is it as simple as you just kind of say, no, sorry, dude, or what do you do?
Well, he deserves that money. I mean, look, he was fantastic last year, and there's no reason to think he won't do it again this year. I think he's very deserving of that, and I think he will get it from somebody. And if I had to guess, I don't think it'll be the Dolphins. Now, what the Dolphins did last offseason with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey was flat out stupid.
Yep.
And I said it at the time, and I don't see – you don't pay players for what they've done.
Exactly.
You pay them for what they're going to do moving forward. If you pay Jonnu Smith, then you better feel very confident he's going to be able to repeat these results, and he might be able to do that. I'm in favor of the Dolphins getting as many draft picks as possible and being as young as possible heading into 2025.
I thought the Steelers were a surprising choice. I totally understand the Arthur Smith connection, and Arthur Smith has always been very unique with his offense. What they had Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and I think you still have Jonnu Smith being as like a featured target there as a tight end. But it's also kind of weird, though, because you just mentioned Pat Freiermuth a little while ago. So it just kind of felt a little like a weird fit. Did any other teams kind of pop up to you as a possible Jonnu Smith trade destination?
Oh, man. I really haven't thought it through as far as tight end needs are concerned.
That's fair.
Now the Chargers got a couple of tight ends here. I was thinking they may be a decent possibility. Cowboys are good. Yeah, I think a lot of teams could use him, but for the Steelers specifically, it may seem like a unique fit, but I think that the Steelers are really weak at wide receiver after trading George Pickens, so they could be eyeing a lot of 2 tight end looks.
I guess the only thing I was trying to get at there is the idea of like, if he's going to be traded, that you need that supply and demand. And do you think there's any scenario here where he comes back and maybe there is like a little bump in pay, but really nothing substantial? Because I kind of go back to a few years ago with Xavier Howard, and I know Xavier was drafted by the franchise, but Chris Greer did something similar with him where the idea was like, we're just going to bump up his pay and we'll talk about a new contract in the offseason. Is there any scenario you think where the Dolphins could try to resolve this? Is there any scenario where you think Jonnu just says, $4 million in Miami compared to, God, I don't know, he deserves, like you said, 12 to 13, but $8 million in Pittsburgh anyway? He just say, let's run it back with Miami and see if I can have another big year and try to find a payday at 30 years old.
I think you're going to get either you pay him $13 or $14 million, or it's not going to work for him. I think he's putting his foot down, and he should. He's very deserving of higher pay based on what he did last year for the Dolphins. So, no, I don't see this as an Xavier Howard scenario. That was an irritating situation where that ended with him getting, I think, an extra $1 million in incentives or something like that, and we had to deal with that all summer. But yeah, I think Jonnu Smith at the end of the day, whether it's with the Dolphins or with somebody else, is going to get somewhere between 13 and 15 million.
I think Ian Rappaport reported that on Friday that, Jonnu really likes being in Miami. And I mean, how can you blame him with the production he had in this Dolphins offense? But Kat, what would the outlook of this tight end room be like without Jonnu Smith? Because I saw a lot of, tweets, posts across different social media platforms, including Twitter. And the idea was like, wow, not only are we not going to take Tyler Warren, we're going to, trade Jonnu Smith. And I saw that and I kind of thought, let's slow down for a second here, because both of the first 2 years as Mike McDaniel offense, everyone was kicking and screaming because you use the franchise tag on someone like Mike Gesicki, who doesn't really do too much. And then you have the 2023 year where you had the big four of Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, and you're second in the league in points per game. Your third player in targets is Durham Smythe. You don't need that world-beating tight end. What do you see of that outlook? Because I just thought it was weird that everyone was like, man, like we're going to have this massive hole and all of a sudden the offense is going to stink. I didn't think it was that big of a swing.
So how will the tight end room look without Jonnu Smith? Not good. I mean,
that's true.
I would say, and I would never try to form an argument that Julian Hill or Pharaoh Brown is an upgrade over Jonnu Smith. That'd be insane. But you do have a different type of player. You've got blockers, and I think there is some benefit to that. Now, Julian Hill can't tie his shoes without getting a penalty, but they've invested a lot of time in him, and I'm one that does believe Julian Hill does have talent, especially in the blocking department, and so it would be fascinating to see. I think you've got to take in 2025 as the roster starts to bleed away more and more because of the salary cap. I think you've got to see what you have in the Julian Hills and the Storm Ducks of this roster. So it'll be interesting to see. One thing I was talking with a friend about if we're talking about trades and with the Steelers and what they have, what about a little swap for Darnell Washington?
I heard of that, yeah.
For the Steelers. I mean, maybe how about Darnell Washington and a late round pick for Jonnu Smith? You're getting a guy on his rookie contract. He's a massive tight end in the Julian Hill mold, and we're going to help out the offensive line with a 6th blocker this year.
So that's what's interesting to me, because the tight end unit would take a step back, but does that necessarily guarantee that the offense is going to take a step back? I have a post here from Rich Rebar who said the highest pass rates when a tight end was on the field in 2024. Mike Gesicki was number one at nearly 86%. Jonnu Smith was second. So whenever Jonnu Smith was on the field, there was an 80% chance the Miami Dolphins were going to throw the football. I think if the Dolphins are going to be successful in 2025, you need more of a balanced attack. So again, I go back to the idea of Jonnu Smith had this awesome year last year, but there was a cost. Like, this wasn't an elite offense. So if this unit takes a step back, I'm ready to hang up and listen. We're going to get into, I tortured you this week, giving you some homework to watch the Houston Texans game. And, I saw some, screens to Devon Achane where Julian Hill was out in space and making a good block and different things like that. So while the production from tight end isn't going to be as obvious in the box score, I'm not ready to sit here and say, like, if you get rid of Jonnu Smith, you're tanking. Like, those takes I just thought were very, very weird.
Right. And look, when it comes to the Dolphins offense, and we saw this in the Texans game, we saw it in a lot of games, this flag football offense doesn't work, okay? It's figured out. They moved the safeties back, and they said to the Dolphins, throw the ball underneath all game. You're not going to be able to help yourself. You're going to get greedy. You're going to want to go down the field. You're going to make mistakes. And if you don't, we're going to take your 5'10", 180-pound receivers and maul the crap out of them when they catch the ball. And by the end of the year or the end of the game even, they're going to be hurt. Like, this doesn't work. And I'm looking forward to rebuilding the offense in much of a different way. And it's not a shot at the guys who are here. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, for them individually, you can't deny the talent of those guys. Collectively, you're very one-dimensional on offense.
I couldn't agree more. And Kat, that's why for a little bit of homework, I wanted us to go back and rewatch Week 15 Dolphins at Texans. And my perspective there was, we saw the Dolphins at their weakest moment. They needed to win this game. I think they entered winning 4 of the last 5, gaining some sort of momentum. This was the season on the line, and we saw all the weaknesses on display. So I kind of wanted to look at this through the lens of the Texans game, the idea of, have the Dolphins really made it taken a step forward to fix these needs, fix these issues? So just to kind of set the picture, I went through our show notes for the preview show we did for this Houston Texans game, and my first note at the top was, how will Patrick Paul and Kendall Lamb at the time, how are they going to hold up against the pass rush led by Donnell Hunter and Will Anderson? One thing that I already think the Dolphins have already taken a step forward in fixing is we went all week thinking that Kendall Lamb's going to be the starter. He practiced for the first time that week Friday. All of a sudden, Saturday, Sunday, Jackson Carmine is your starting right tackle, just kind of thrown on us. And I got to be honest, man, looking at that offensive line, what was kind of like the doomsday scenario. You had Donnell Hunter, Will Anderson, obviously the 2 pass rushers in the league. So let's just start there. That Dolphins offensive line was absolutely beat up start to finish. How do you feel like the Miami Dolphins have done going from a unit that included, Jackson Carmine, Rob Jones, Liam Eichenberg, and made some upgrades?
It is one position that I feel like they upgraded a few spots. I mean, I think Jonas Iavania, just by being alive, is going to be a better right guard than what we had with Liam Eichenberg. And I mean, you almost have to see it to believe how bad Liam Eichenberg was in this Texans game. I mean, you're getting Austin Jackson back at right tackle, and hey, look, I think he's been turning into a serviceable player, and he's got some athleticism downfield too. I think a lot of plays left the playbook when Austin Jackson left the lineup. Brewer had a fantastic first season with the Dolphins, and Daniels, you're hoping that he's going to be healthy and back to the form he showed a couple of years ago. James Daniels. That would be huge for the Dolphins. But obviously, too, at left tackle, Teron Armstead is the star that you lost. One thing about this game, not to get too far into the Texans game, I thought Patrick Paul looked like an NFL player.
I agree.
Very much so in this game. So that was good. He went up against Will Anderson for most of the game. I thought he did pretty well. Not great, but pretty well, especially in pass protection. So I think on paper right now, you can't say the Dolphins have a great offensive line, but I think it's more unproven than anything else. They've got a young offensive line.
I think there was a fumble early in the game where Eichenberg got absolutely beat. You posted the video on X. There was another play where there was a Raheem Mostert was in the backfield in pass protection. The Houston Texans were bringing a blitz off the side, and Mostert was there ready to chip the blitzer. And instead, Liam Eichenberg, he had a rusher coming at his face, and he just gave him like a high five to the chest and let him run by. And it allowed forced Raheem Mostert to jump over, let the blitzer go free. Tua had to scramble out of bounds. And I was just thinking about that. And I was thinking of the idea of, moving on from Jonnu Smith and how the Dolphins are doing this hard set in terms of money. If the Dolphins are sitting here with $25 million in salary cap space to begin the season, I have zero idea why you didn't pay Robert Jones $4 million like the Cowboys did to let him be a backup. That is probably, like, I know we're having a May 30th talk here, and I know this is a minor detail, but just seeing, like, if you're one injury away from someone like Liam Eichenberg playing, which I understand the value, he's on a vet minimum, he is making, like, dirt money. He has experience in the system. He has positional versatility. But if you have $25 million, and Kat, you mentioned it earlier, this team loves its one dimension. And if it was going to live and die by that one dimension, why not add just like a little bit more depth at guard? That is probably my biggest takeaway from just even watching the first 2 quarters of this game is, God, you should have done more, just a little bit more depth where it wouldn't have taken up this much money, especially if you're going to let some guys walk.
Well, you still can. I mean, Brandon Scherf and Will Hernandez are still out there. They're not great scheme fits, but who cares? I mean, you mentioned Robert Jones. I mean, it's kind of like which knife do you want to cut your finger off between him and Liam Eichenberg? But I've always liked Jones a little bit more than Eichenberg. If I had to pick between one of them, I certainly would have picked Jones. I don't care if he doesn't have the center tackle versatility. At least he's somebody that I thought was a good backup guard.
Agreed.
And a stretch as a starter. I've always felt that way about him. I've tended to like him a little bit more than other people, but yeah, I would have liked Robert Jones back. And they are thin on the offensive line. I mean, they signed Larry Borum. They've got a couple of other guys, but they're not 9 or 10 deep on the offensive line. You're right.
So Tua finished this game 29 for 40, 1 touchdown, a couple of interceptions. He had a fumble. What were your overall impressions from him in this game? Because I have written down here his first 3 attempts to Tyreek Hill were all just the timing was just flat out off. They were all incomplete. And more importantly, though, he was getting hit every single play. Like, I don't want to sit here and say it was everybody else's fault, but he was put into an absolute unforgiving situation against the Texans defensive front that Miami just really didn't have any answers for. And it felt like, man, like 60 to 70% of these plays, they were over before they even started.
You know, I thought in the first half the pass protection was semi-decent, even on the right side of the line, and then it got worse as the game went on. But to take a step back, I mean, I have my own theory that you thought I was having a good summer, and then you blindsided me with, hey, go back and watch the traumatizing Texans game. I'm like, okay, I guess. But anyway, to answer your question, let me put in perspective how bad the Dolphins lost this game 20-12. Okay, let me put in perspective how bad the Dolphins' offense was in this game. I don't care what you think about PFF. This was the lowest grade PFF ever gave the Dolphins for a game, dating back to 2005.
What a stat!
Almost 20 years.
What a stat!
And after the game, the Texans game, after I was done vomiting, I said that was the worst game of Tua Tagovailoa's career. The next 2 days later comes out, PFF grades it as the worst game of Tua Tagovailoa's career by a mile. I think his grade was 30.4, and I think before that, his lowest grade ever in a game was like 40, somewhere between 43 and 47 in a game. Tua was awful in this game, and he was awful in a game that the Dolphins 100% do or die needed to have, because they started the season 2-6, and then they beat the Rams on Monday Night Football, and we started to look ahead and saying, okay, you got kind of a few winnable games coming up, and then you've got that Texans game late in the season. Dolphins were 6-7 during this game, and I mean, to turn the ball over 4 times and still have a chance to win in the end, and then, piss it all away was hard to watch. It was easily the worst. That and the Bills' loss in Week 2 were easily the two hardest games to watch of the season.
His first interception was very bad. It was very, very bad. Safety was just sitting right over the middle of the field. I think he was looking for Jonnu, and there was less than a minute left in the first half, and they took it all the way down the other side of the field to get some points on the board. I completely agree with you. I don't know. I just felt like, you see that. I even looked up if Tyreek Hill was on the injury report this entering this week, because just seeing how often the passes were missing, I was like, there has to be something wrong here with the timing, because everything just looked flat out off from the beginning. Kat, we haven't talked about this a lot this offseason, but how do you feel about Miami's direction in terms of special teams? Because I know right at the top there, I think it was the middle of the first quarter, Tank Dell had a 20-yard return. They had a huge kickoff return later in the game as well. So I'm just kind of curious, because as I look back, I go back to Buffalo week 18 a couple years ago, the huge kick return that kind of, really warped that game a little bit. That is a huge key that I don't think we talk enough about, is just that special teams has continuously been putting one arm for the Dolphins behind their back.
Yeah, this was another bad special teams performance. I'm happy that the Dolphins no longer have Danny Crossman here. They've got Craig Aukerman instead, and I love that they've replaced Jake Bailey. In the Texans game wasn't bad, but he is comfortably my least favorite Dolphins punter of all time. And I'm glad they got Ryan Stonehouse in here, who's got a big leg. I mean, I'd rather look, just bomb the ball 60 yards and figure it out. I mean, instead of Jake Bailey, who punts the ball from his own 50 and can't get it inside the 20. So, but special teams played a huge role in this game. Dolphins were losing in this game 13-6, and then you had the fake punt where Duke Riley blew an assignment. Instead of holding containment, he crashed down inside and got out of his lane, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, Dari Azar or something, number 33 for them, scampered 35 yards. The Texans in this game had 181 yards of total offense, 181 yards, and 35 of them came on that play. So there's just so much to throw up about in this game. But yeah, special teams, a lot of missed tackles, not great, and I'm glad Danny Crossman's out of here.
It's pretty interesting because when you look at the defense in this game, I don't think they did anything spectacular. I do shout out Zach Sealer. There was one drive, first down. He blew up the pocket, and CJ Stroud ran around a little bit, eventually got to throw away the ball. He was on the field for second down. I think they got 7 yards to John Mitchie. And then third down on 3rd and 3, Zach Sealer still on the field, blew up the play again, and beat CJ Stroud for the sack. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. I just wanted to give Zach Sealer that shout out. Back-to-back years with 10 sacks, the only defensive tackle to do that. And just the motor, man. It's just unreal seeing him playing like 98% of snaps. And from first down to third down, having that same consistently, having that same pressure is just such a relief for a defense that has a lot of pieces in transition.
Yeah, and defensively, this was, and it's a shame, and it's a indication of how the Dolphins never play complementary football. And I mean, this is a game when you hold the Texans to 181 yards, 35 of which come on a fake punt. You should 10 out of 10 times win the football game. And even going deeper into that, the Texans had 11 drives in this game. In 6 of those 11 drives, they got 1 yard or less on the drive.
That's insane.
At the end of the second quarter, the Texans had 3 drives, and 2 of those 3 drives they put 10 points on the board and only moved the ball 28 yards because the offense screwed them so badly. So this was a pathetic offensive performance by the Dolphins, and you can't help but think if the Dolphins had even a below average offensive performance, I think they win the game.
I wrote a story for Dolphins on Sports Illustrated recently. I was talking kind of about Kader Kohou, especially with Jalen Ramsey expected to be traded. Kader Kohou was jumping off the film for this entire game. He forced a fumble early. He blew up a couple screens, and I did some research, Kat. I'm getting more and more comfortable him not being cornerback 1 as in like he deserves like to be paid like a cornerback 1, but I'm comfortable going into the season letting him be someone who he can be playing on the boundary. If you want to move him in the slot at times, go right ahead, but he's somebody I think you need to have on the field 90% of the snaps at least.
Oh, absolutely. Whether he's your number 1 is definitely a stretch, but whether he's your number 2 cornerback or your slot guy, he's a starter for you, and he is somebody I point to and say I'm comfortable giving him a long-term contract. maybe not quite there yet because he had a great first season and his second season was shaky. A lot of people had a shaky second season especially after Chubb and Jalen Phillips went down. But yeah, he's somebody I'm comfortable if he has a good year giving very solid number 2 cornerback money to.
Absolutely, yeah, and I just kind of meant in the sense of when you're losing Ramsey. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts here because early in the game, Tank Dell was doing an end around. The Dolphins had him in the backfield. Javon Holland had him like 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage with. Anthony Walker had a shot around the line of scrimmage with. And I think later in the game, Nico Collins scores a touchdown where he's just standing in between Jordan Poyer and Anthony Walker. So when you look at this defense going into year 2 under Anthony Weaver, they were top 10 in points allowed, top 10 in rushing yards per average, top 10 in passing yards per average. I don't like it's so hard to wrap my head around those numbers because I see guys like Javon Holland struggle. I see how bad Jordan Poyer was, and I can't really gauge what this defense is going to look like early in the year with so many new faces when you consider that these guys who are veterans and they were supposed to know the defense did have their own struggles while the defense overall continued to be relatively successful.
Yeah, look, on paper, the Dolphins are going to head into the 2025 season as the worst team on paper at defensive back. That's going to happen. Okay,
no doubt.
Now, having said that, Chris Kaufman throws out a term all the time called, or he did in 2019, called "you're going to be shopping in your own closet a lot." And in that, you go back to 2019, it looked pretty pathetic as well. But you came away with guys like Nick Needham that showed a lot of promise. Of course, then he tears his leg, which happens to every Dolphin who shows promise. But
brutal.
I'm interested if we can temper expectations and just you get to the point where I am and say, okay, look, the Dolphins are not going to compete for a championship this year. From that point, if we can let that be, yeah, I'm interested to see if Isaiah Johnson makes the roster. I'm going to see what Storm Duck can do out there on the boundary. And if they can't hack it, then we have the answer to that question. But I think you look back at 2019 when you came away with Zach Sealer and Nick Needham and these types of guys. You did it because they got opportunities to show themselves, and the Dolphins in future years were better because of it. So that's what you hope the defensive back position and the defense in general provides this year.
The fact you didn't bring up Cam Smith, does that kind of let us know where you are in terms of the cornerback race at the moment?
He's already hurt. I mean, not even in June. And the guy's limping off the field. I put him out there and see what happens. I mean, I'm really surprised at how pathetic of a pick that's been. I liked the pick when it happened, and I thought he had a lot of potential. I still think he has a lot of potential, but he just can't get out of his own way.
I still can't figure out Miami's process at cornerback, man. You make this first-round pick at Noah Igbenogany that really doesn't pan out. Cam Smith, a second-round pick, doesn't pan out. But then you got guys like Kader Kohu, you got Storm Duck, and then you're paying guys like Byron Jones and Jalen Ramsey. It's just been such a very weird process where they're doing a lot at cornerback, and just to get a unit that's passable, it feels.
Yes, I agree. And when the Dolphins invest a lot in the cornerback position, they get bitten by it. And when they completely ignore it, they come away with something. So it's completely ass backwards on that. So, I mean, there are 5 or 6 players that you hope get out there and figure it out. And you hope that Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, and Chop Robinson, you hope that 3-man platoon pressures the quarterback enough so that it takes a little bit of pressure off them.
I think Bradley Chubb's going to be a pleasant surprise this year. That's definitely me. Wearing the Dolphins hat, I am a homer, but I think he even came out and said that he is going to benefit from the fact he didn't come back early last year. He's really taken his time. And this is somebody who was a 2-time Pro Bowler. I think he was leading the league in forced fumbles when he got hurt for the Dolphins. I know everyone wasn't a fan with the price tag that the Dolphins gave up, but I do think that he can really be one of these pillar players for the defense. And, if we want to say that the Dolphins are going to win 10, 11 games this year, you're going to be able to go through the box score and highlight 3 or 4 Bradley Chubb plays. That's the only way I think the Dolphins get there.
Yes, it was so frustrating with what happened with Chubb because I was a little bit against the Chubb trade, not too much, and then I came around on it. But one thing that didn't scare me off was his injury history as much as other people did. I thought he had some one-off injuries. And then in the 2023 season, the guy never left the field, was out there all the time, was a warrior, had 11 sacks and 6 forced fumbles, with a game and a half or a game left to play. And then 3 minutes left, he gets a freak injury and tears his ACL. And now when you tear your ACL that late, you put yourself out for the next year too, which is a double whammy. So, yeah, it was a shame, and I'm rooting for him to come back, and I'm glad that he took the deal that he did to allow him to stay in a Dolphins uniform.
So, Kat, I put you through like summer camp hell having to watch this Houston Texans game, and I think for me, the three biggest issues. Offensive line, especially what you're doing in the interior. I just thought the guards really struggled in this game. The secondary, specifically, the Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland missed tackles, missed assignments, and then special teams. Those were the three things that going into 2025 that the Dolphins are capable of fixing. Overall, 60,000 feet in the sky. Do you feel like they've kind of taken those steps towards and to so much changes? This is a week 15 game. The Dolphins already played 13 games entering. Do you think they've taken those steps to kind of establish a roster that can survive 17 games?
Not really. Well, let me say this. Right now, if we're talking about safety, you've just got so many unknowns, and Ife Melifonwu has shown the ability to do it. He's got the physical skills. He's a big, fast kid, but he started looking like he was putting it all together last year in Detroit, but then he got hurt in week 4. So I like the swing on that one. Ashton Davis, I'm not a huge fan of. He's really, to me, a part-time player. Dante Trader at safety, I think he plays faster than his 4.65 40 speed, but still, is he somebody? I like that pick a little more than I did on draft day. I think he's an intelligent player, and you're playing in a zone defense where you don't have to cover as much ground. And
Agreed.
Elijah Campbell played a lot more in this Texans game too. I was always hoping he would get a little bit more of an opportunity. With the Dolphins.
Same. When he's on the field, you see him. Like you hear him brought up as like he just makes he's around the ball. It feels.
Yeah, and he's been with the Dolphins for quite a bit, and now you turn around and the guy's almost 30. Yeah, it's like when is he going to really get an opportunity here? So I hope he gets on the field too. But no, I mean if you were looking at another team in the NFL and you saw this safety lineup, you kind of wince a little bit, and that's what you, in all honesty, have to do with the Dolphins at this point.
However, though, Jordan Poyer made his own teammates wince every time he came around. So do we got a negative here? Is it a positive?
Now that's an interesting point. Is that Javon Holland got a big contract with the Giants and overall has had a great career. Jordan Poyer overall we know has had a great career in general, but was not good last year. So if you just take the 2024 starting safeties, it's kind of hard to downgrade from how they played. So that's, I guess, something, but still, there's a lot of proving that needs to be done at the safety position and defensive back in general.
I think if you wanted to make it sound really generic, if you want to say the team was a C last year, you're happy if it looks like a D+ this year, right? The drop-off's not huge, but it's not like it's a success or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's I'm intrigued at the talent on the front seven. You've got the 3-man platoon of Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, and Bradley Chubb. And then up front, you've got Zach Sealer, and you hope Kenneth Grant brings it quickly. And I thought Benito Jones played decent last year as a nose tackle. There's not a lot of depth, obviously. I mean, pretty much no depth on the defensive line. But also at inside linebacker, I thought Tyrell Dotson was a great midseason addition. I think Jordan Brooks played out of his mind in a few games, the Texans game being one of them. So, yeah, you hope that they can have a really good front seven, maybe take some pressure off the defensive backs, and then from there you hope without Jalen Ramsey, a few of these guys break out. That's the best case scenario.
Perfectly said. Kat, we made it through the Houston Texans game, but no tears. Thank you so much for joining me today on Another Dolphins Podcast. That is it. That is all the time we have. We hope everyone out there has a wonderful week, and most importantly, fins up.
What's up?